All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to everyone who's joined us today. I'm your host, Colin Delaney. It's my pleasure to talk about illusions of ubiquity, trying to present some creative advertising ideas for digital politics and advocacy, or for politics and advocacy broadly. And folks out there, if I know you already, man, I wish we could hang out in person. And if I don't know you yet, well, howdy, it's good to meet you. And thanks to everyone who's introducing themselves in the chat. So I'm going to get started in just 1 second. The hassle is that because I'm doing a presentation through most of this, I'm not going to be able to see the screen. It also means that you guys can't see me make funny faces when I get things wrong. So there is that. That's an advantage. For questions, if you'll ask them in the chat, Rachel, who's helping out with this session, I'll periodically take a break and ask her to read off a couple of the questions. I'm gonna be covering a whole lot of ground. I just added a couple of new ideas that folks sent in when I put it out on the interwebs asking for cool ideas. So we're going to have a lot of ground to cover in a pretty short period of time. So over at my website, epolitics.com, I went ahead and posted links to half dozen or so articles that are going to expand on some of the points that I make during the presentation today. So yeah, it's just the lead article on epolitics.com right now. And also, I'll have contact information. My Twitter handle will be on the screen all the time. I'm at epolitics. And from the website, epolitics.com, you can drop me an email. So if you have any questions about anything we talk about that we're not able to get to here, or new ideas that it inspires, I'd be very happy to chat anytime. So let me go ahead here. I also have to note I caught the cold that's going around DC this weekend. So if I break into a coughing fit, please forgive me. And again, I am glad that once I share screen, you can't see my face. So let me do this really quickly here. And then I will bring up the PowerPoint here. So let us go ahead and dive right in. So our topic today, creative digital and social advertising. And I am your host, Colin Delaney. Again, I know a lot of the Netroots folks, but I'm sure particularly since it's virtual, we have a ton of new people. Welcome. So excited. Netroots is a wonderful community. I have been going to, I think I've missed one in-person Netroots Nation in since 2008. I'm a huge fan. I learn stuff every year. And next year, I hope we can see each other in person. So I've been doing digital politics and advocacy for over 20 years. I work as a digital strategy consultant. I'm the founder and editor of epolitics.com. And I also, I took a little break from epolitics because I kind of burned out after 15 years of writing. But I'm still writing for campaignsand elections.com, and epolitics will be coming back soon. I'm every election cycle, I update my comprehensive guide to digital politics and advocacy. It is, as far as I can tell, the most comprehensive book on the subject, covering everything from fundraising to logistics to advertising and much more. So you can check that out at epolitics.com. And I also play bass in a really kick-ass rock and roll band that the pandemic has not, pandemic hasn't made life easy for us, but we're going to start rocking DC really soon. So keep an eye out for that too. All right. So I got my start before the internet was a big deal back in Texas in the 90s, where politics is played as a contact sport. And working in Texas, you pick up a very pragmatic and practical approach to political advocacy, and which is translated for me over into digital politics. And I think that you'll see that kind of how are we going to get results on the ground mindset sprinkled throughout this conversation. But let's really get into things now. But why do we advertise online? If this were a an in-person session, I would be asking questions of all of y'all and turning this into more of a back and forth. But alas, I just have to talk at you today. So we advertise online because there is an angry mob out there. No, it's because that's where the people are. You want to be reaching people where they are, and as we know, increasingly that is on the interwebs. So, what are typical goals? It could be all over the place, right? You could be driving engagement to a post or engagement in the form of conversation among people. You can try persuasion. You may just be trying to get people to click to an article, or you may be trying to prompt social sharing. A lot of times people are approaching it for long-term or short-term list building, to promote advocacy actions, and of course, ultimately, to put political pressure on decision makers. In the post off to the right, I was promoting one of my articles in the current Facebook environment. Sometimes you are just desperately trying to get someone to see the thing that you published because Facebook doesn't really want to show your stuff to anyone. We can discuss that in more detail later. Excuse me, y'all. First cough. Okay. So sometimes your goals, if you're Vladimir Putin, are to spread dissension, disarray, and divisiveness within a society. This example here, which is my personal favorite, is an actual ad that Russian backed groups were pushing into the American political system via Facebook back in 2016. I, for one, look forward to the arrival of Mullet Jesus. So, um, usually your goals will not be quite as well satanic. Let me give as a quick example, because I think this pulls a bunch of threads together, of a project I've been working on since last year. The client is the Hometown Project. They recruit celebrities who grew up or otherwise, connected to targeted state legislative districts, and then they get the celebrities to make videos supporting the progressive or Democratic candidates. And Ghostbusters fans might recognize Ernie Hudson, the fourth Ghostbuster. So this is a video I got to work with last year. We had targeted content for each district. We did several different targeting strategies. We had access to voter file, so we targeted individual voters via voter file exports, which we uploaded to Facebook as a as custom audiences. Excuse me. We had both Facebook and programmatic video ads. I'm going to talk about programmatic more in a second. And a lot of times, as I said, we were targeting individual voters, but to broaden our reach, we supplemented that with geo targeting, specifically with legislative district targeting, so that we could reach a broad swath of voters. In 2 states, we last year ran 4.5 million ad impressions in about 50 districts at a cost of only about 1.5 cents per voter contact. So you can see the pieces that come in here together: targeted content, custom audience uploads, voter file targeting, and then geo targeting. And then there's the multi-channel angle. So I want to talk for a minute about programmatic advertising. We're going to probably spend half this session on Facebook ads, and then we're going to look into some other things like even promoted tweets and LinkedIn advertising. But I wanted to try to explain programmatic advertising real quick for folks who aren't as familiar with it. As you can guess from the image, programmatic is when the robots take over. So when you go to ESPN or an entertainment related site or a news site like the Washington Post, a good chunk of the ad inventory, the ad slots on those pages, they're not sold by the vendor itself. Washington Post sells some of its own ads, but their excess inventory they sell to programmatic vendors. So if I'm targeting an individual voter, when that voter goes to a website, basically a bidding process happens in microseconds behind the scenes to determine which ad they're going to see. So if I'm trying to target individual voters, in my case, I use a vendor called DS Political. I'll upload a target list to them. They match it with a voter file. And then there are companies behind the scenes that then turn around and match it to match that list, like the voter to device IDs, to voter ad network IDs, to all the things the advertisers use to figure out who you are. So programmatic can be very, very powerful. You can do because you can reach people in so many different places. For a long time, it was somewhat out of reach, but the standards, basically, the barriers to entry are a lot lower now. There's a platform called democraticads.com that you can use with buys, I think, as small as $500. So it's really something to think about if you're trying to get beyond Facebook, because let's face it, Facebook is not looking like the greatest environment of all time. So programmatic is going to come up a bunch while we're talking. I just wanted to kind of get this explanation out of the way. So before we dive into Facebook in more detail, Rachel, are there any questions to start with?
We do not have any questions yet.
Oh my God. Well, you guys must be writing wonderful questions and we'll post them shortly, I am sure. So, with the basics out of the way, the intro out of the way, let's start getting into individual tactics. And again, this will be a little scattershot because we're hitting a lot of ideas in a pretty short period of time. So we're going to make a couple of jumps here and there, but at first it's going to be concentrated on Facebook. So Facebook, sure you guys have used it. When possible, promote beer. That is rule number one. You'll notice that Mom's Clean Air Force here was sharing a news story from NOLA, I believe Gulf Coast outlet there, news outlet. Um, uh, uh, Basically, six-pack rings that feed sea turtles. The important thing is they're promoting somebody else's content. And this can be a really good idea because an outsider may have can provide validation that basically it's like a third party. You're taking advantage of a third party validation. So you can turn around and promote any Facebook post just about by clicking the boost button. We're going to talk, there are pros and cons to that. Behind the scenes in Facebook Business Manager, you have the Ads Manager interface. And this is where you set up the more sophisticated kinds of campaigns, for instance, to allow things like multivariate testing, classic A/B testing, and also you can promote posts that don't appear on your page. But sometimes the boost button is a good answer. There a lot of folks a few years ago were saying that posts promoted via a boost didn't perform as well as posts promoted through the ads manager interface. I haven't found that to be true lately, but as always, your mileage will vary. A couple of the critical variables to think about, of course, going in are targeting and budget. The wider the audience you're trying to reach, the more money you're probably going to have to spend to reach them. So, considering that most nonprofits and people on the left in general are not exactly swimming in cash, um, careful targeting can help you get the most out of a budget. Right. So this is our quick overview of Facebook advertising. If you need to know how to create an ad or how to boost a post, there are other trainings at Netroots that are going to cover that. So let's dip into the crazy idea. Well, maybe not. What kind of targeting can we think about? Well, geo-targeting is relatively straightforward in Facebook. You can even target down to the individual zip code level. There was one point for a wind energy project that I'll talk a little more about in a bit, where we were targeting a swath of counties in wind country, the American plains, basically, trying to build up support for wind energy in those communities. And we were targeting, I think, in the end, about 1,000 separate zip codes to reach those counties. Uh, uh, but you don't always have to be geographically specific. Facebook's also good at helping you target people by interest. I'll talk a little bit about something where I was targeting people who are into fishing, right? So Facebook, because they track everything that we do, including if Facebook's app is on your phone, everywhere you go, probably, Facebook has a good idea of what you like and don't like. And so interest targeting can be one way to put your content in front of um, folks who are most likely to respond to it. Demographic targeting. This can be really important. Specifically, Facebook in particular tends to, its audience is generally older and more female than the population at large. So if you're trying to reach a younger audience, you may well have to target by age, simply to keep all of your content from feeding to an older audience. Even if you want to reach some people over 50, you still might find that you have to reach anyone under 50, you have to exclude everyone over. It depends on, again, the circumstance. Custom audience targeting, I've alluded to this. You basically, with a custom audience, you're using the back end, the ads manager interface. You're uploading a list, email addresses, mobile numbers, or Facebook IDs, and you're targeting the people on that list. Targeting is imperfect. You can imagine that people may have several email addresses, and the one that you have in your file for them may not be the one they use on Facebook. But we're going to talk about some creative uses for custom audiences in a bit. And voter file targeting, like I talked about, which is for the Hometown Project, which is a subset of custom audience targeting. Typically, a voter file export is a spreadsheet that you upload into Facebook as a custom audience, or get it into Facebook some other mechanism. And then we can do targeting based on behavior. And some groups do this really well. A lot of other folks have never really heard about it. But you can use what's called the Facebook pixel to retarget people who may have taken an action and come to your website. For instance, if someone clicked on a link to an advocacy action, but you may be able to find via the Facebook pixel, or basically you may be able to figure out who landed on the page but didn't take the action, and turn around and use a custom audience derived from the Facebook pixel to target them with ads that encourage them to actually finish the advocacy action. Quite a few groups have used this for fundraising, because plenty of people will come to your donations page but not really finish the process. And some groups have seen really good results with spending a little bit of money to retarget people who came to the page but did not actually complete the action. And now, if you're using something like a programmatic system, retargeting also shows up. I don't believe this happens quite so much as it used to, but Zappos ads that used to follow you all around the web, that would be an example of you're going to a website, your presence is being recorded, your ad ID is being noted, and then you are being targeted by follow on content. I bought a new amplifier for my bass guitar back in the spring, and I am still being hounded by ads from Sweetwater, the vendor I got it from. So very common in the commercial world, less common in the political advocacy world, but I really do think there are some powerful uses. Actually, we'll talk about some stuff the Trump campaign did on that as well in just a few minutes. So let's go from targeting into testing. Now, this is a classic little diagram of how an A/B test works, but and you know, it's very common on the web or on Facebook for people to basically set up A/B tests behind the scenes to find out which which photograph's going to work best, which tagline is going to work best, which call to action works best. But this is the basic mechanism here. In this breakdown, half the visitors see one variation, half the visitors see the other variation, and then what is the difference in what they do? Which one gets them to take the action better? Now, the tricky bit is, now, if I'm just posting 4 or 5 different things and I'm trying to find out, which one is going to perform best today, I might not try to isolate variables or anything like that. I may just say this package of content versus this package of content, which is going to do better this afternoon. But often we're actually trying to find, bigger picture, like what are the messages that are resonating. So this is for this wind energy project I mentioned. This is an A/B test around messaging that we were using. The one on the right talks about jobs. The one on the left is clean energy, clean air. These two things were targeting a similar audience. They had the same amount of money behind them. They had the same photograph. The only thing that was different was the text. And you'll see that, about a little under a 20% difference in performance if you look at that reach number down the screen. So, a single test like this doesn't necessarily tell you much, but if you repeat the test and you consistently see similar results, that can tell you which of your messages is resonating the best among your targets, among this particular set of targets. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Bad week for colds in DC. All right, so testing. Now we can get into this large scale micro targeting and testing. We can get into the interesting things the Trump campaign was doing. And I know we don't like Trump, but um, uh, even the devil can teach you a few things here and there. So that guy on the screen is Brad Parscale. He has gotten into some trouble since, but he was the digital director and at the end, the de facto campaign manager for Trump 2016. And they leveraged commercial marketing tools to basically run Facebook content or Facebook ads in bulk, targeting very small segments of audience. Maybe people who cared about roads and bridges in a few counties in northern Florida, kind of thing. But because they were doing things on such a scale, they could target a lot of these niches all at once. And then when people clicked on content, when they engaged with content, or when they clicked through to an article, um, the campaign would use that retargeting concept that we talked about earlier and then hit them with more ads based around the particular content that they had been interested in, right? So you dangle bait in front of people in terms of content, you see who bites, and then you give more of that content to the people who bit. And again, this wasn't anything novel in the commercial marketing world, but it was new for politics. And you can't do anymore what the Trump campaign did in terms of scale. Facebook has limited the number of ad variations that a single page can run, not just politics, this affects commercial advertisers as well. However, that idea, though, of dangling content as bait in front of people and then retargeting or otherwise following up with them based on what they bid on, I think that's still applicable. So definitely something to think about. Less of a short-term boost, more of something to think about over the long term. Again, the Trump campaign saw basically they recruited hundreds of thousands of potential donors this way. And at least through 2018 and 2019, the Republican National Committee was still raising a lot of money off those folks. Note, though, they were recruited on Facebook, but the fundraising primarily happened via email, and certainly the follow-up fundraising that's going on now happens via email. So the Facebook work the campaign did was more on the recruiting side. So Rachel, do we have any questions? I can't see the screen. Do we have any questions right now?
There are a few questions in here. So I'm just gonna, there was a question about Facebook Pixel. So do they need to have some sort of widget or something installed on our external website if we're tracking traffic from Facebook to our website to action?
That's a good one. Yeah, there is a code you install. I honestly have never done it myself, so I don't want to lie and say how easy or hard it is, but it appears to be pretty straightforward. I've only taken advantage of it after they've already been installed. But yeah, it's kind of like the Google Analytics tracking code that so many of us have on the site. And yes, of course, when you put a Facebook pixel on, Facebook will be tracking all of the traffic to that page.
Great. So there are two other questions I see here. So one is, do all the programmatic brokers use the same network of website properties, or do some have access to some sites but not others?
That is a great question. I honestly don't know. I think the differences are going to be more on the ad network side. So back in the day, DoubleClick, the companies that are actually placing the banners. My suspicion is that some media outlets are going to be using like one ad network over another. As I understand it, the programmatic vendors usually have relationships with a lot of different ad networks. So In other words, an individual ad network may not be able to reach somebody, but the programmatic vendor, if they work with several ad networks, should be able to do it through at least one of them. And of course, there are sites that only do their own advertising, right? They don't have any external ad. In a case like that, you have to go directly to that publication. But as far as I know, the vendors are pretty equal across the board as far as what properties they can target on. Where they're going to vary is obviously cost and additional features they provide. For instance, are they doing voter file matching for you, or do you have to do that on your end? And then what quality is the inventory they have? For instance, if a video ad plays at the bottom of a page where no one's looking at it, that doesn't count. So you want to ask hard questions of your programmatic vendors about inventory quality. For example, if you're running what's called pre-roll video, which is video that like you're watching videos on a website and an ad appears before or after. You want unskippable ads. That is higher quality inventory. So yeah, I would definitely ask a programmatic vendor about their reach, but I think that market's competitive enough that kind of evens out. Hard questions though, definitely ask around the quality of the inventory. Great questions.
And one last one I'll read here is with some of the changes that Facebook instituted specifically for political orgs and campaigns, what would you suggest to be the top 3 ways to target and advertise?
Oh, it's really it's that's a tough one because it totally depends on what you're trying to get done. I know it sucks. This is the standard consultant reply or standard digital strategist reply. It depends on what you're trying to do. So it's like, who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to get them to do? And then with that particular audience, what things are going to work the best? So for the political advertising, the most important thing to do is be sure that everything is approved well in advance, right? Your Facebook page is approved to run ads. Your individual ad creators themselves have gone through the approval process. Your page disclaimers are set up. Um, ad accounts are linked to the right disclaimers. These are all things that can turn around and bite you in the butt. So get that done first. But unfortunately, it's really hard to say what is the best or the top 3 strategies because it's going to be based around the people you need to reach and the content that's gonna move them. Okay, if that's it, let us go back and dive in. Let's see what we got here. What's next? Oh, custom audiences. So I want to talk about a couple of interesting ways to use custom audiences. So if we recall, a custom audience is a list of either names and addresses or email addresses or mobile numbers or Facebook IDs. So you're generally trying to target the people on that custom audience list, although there may be times where you upload a list that you want to not reach. An example might be if you're trying to grow your um, uh, 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 basically, if you're trying to grow your list beyond, grow your Facebook following beyond the people who follow it right now, I might exclude the people that follow my page, or I might exclude the people who are on my email list already, and try instead to only target new people. Now, the example I want to talk about now is way cooler. Is uh, using Facebook to improve the performance of a fundraising email. And I believe it was Trilogy Interactive ran the first test that I'd heard about doing this back in 2014. And they ran it with a couple of different Democratic senatorial campaigns. So the basic idea is, you know, we're going to try to test if Facebook ads that people receive around the same time they get a fundraising message, if those Facebook ads will improve the performance of the fundraising message. And so they did an A/B test. They had one group get a fundraising message. They would be targeted by Facebook ads for about 3 days, I think. and then they would receive a follow-up fundraising ask, basically trying to get them to complete the action from the first one. The second group got just the 2 emails and no ad. What do you think happened? Again, I wish we were live and able to talk back and forth about this. But what happened was the people who saw the ad gave more money, and they gave more than enough money to cover the cost of the ad. So coming up on year-end fundraising, um, particularly if you're doing something like trying to um, mobilize or motivate people who've never donated before but have been on your list a while, you might upload a custom audience of people on your email list, target them with glowing content or emotional heartstrings tugging content related to your organization, about your organization, and then while you're sending out the fundraising messages. And as this group did, you could try an A/B test, or you could just try running the ads. um, so many times, people see a message in their inbox and they mean to do something, but they don't. And this is a way to try to prime them to act. So it's worth a shot. Again, with year-end fundraising, Giving Tuesday kind of things coming up. I will point out, though, of course, though, that Facebook is likely to get quite a bit more expensive toward the end of the year because of holiday shopping advertising. Back in 2019, I was working with Save the Children Action Network. They were trying to get petition signatures in early voting states to build support for early childhood education. Cool thing was they were going to take the petition signatures and present them to the Democratic candidates, and then turn those into basically online events. So we ran advertising in these battleground states, targeting a lookalike audience, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, a lookalike audience based on Save the Children Action Network's email list. Um, uh, Sorry, losing a train of thought here. Um, and then, once people had taken the action, they turned it into a real world action, giving the signatures to the candidates, and then took that real world action and turned it into an online action, promoting it on Facebook to show the effect of the petition signatures. Very cool, right? But our cost per signature doubled in from mid-October through the end of November. And had we continued much into December, it would have gone up even higher. So anyway, long story, just to illustrate that costs are likely to go up on Facebook in the last 6 months or last 6 weeks of the year, with especially with Black Friday, and then also Giving Tuesday. That puts a lot of extra paid content onto Facebook. So again, sorry guys, a little woozy this week, but let's hang in there. All right, so let's talk about that lookalike targeting. Oh, little meerkats. So again, as we've discussed, Facebook knows everything about us. So if I upload a custom audience, people who took action on a page, my email list, whatever it is, I can ask Facebook to create a lookalike audience based on my original audience. And the thinking is that people who are similar to the folks on your list are more likely to respond to your appeals than the general public. And this is lookalike, not based on just raw demographic data, but based on everything they've ever done on Facebook. A little creepy, yes, but welcome to Facebook. Um, and you can choose like degrees of lookalike. I think it's on a 1 to 10 scale. And I think if I remember right, it breaks down basically if I pick a 2% lookalike audience, that's the 2% of Facebook users who are most similar to my list. But a lot of groups have used this. I have a friend who's a Romanian a political consultant based in Romania. He works around the world. And, in places like Ghana, he's gone in and gotten the email list supporter list from the party they're working for, turned around, created a lookalike audience, and then targeted that lookalike audience and used that to grow this sphere even in an environment where most people would think that email wasn't very useful. When we're working in the developing world, we tend to focus much more on mobile devices, mobile social networks. But he has found that email custom audience with lookalike gets him a long way, even in places one might not expect. Again, if you're trying to expand your advocacy or your fundraising audiences, lookalikes are something good to experiment with. And you can do A/B tests, of course, using different degrees of lookalike, right? 2% versus 5% versus 10%. I think on that Save the Children project, we found that like a 4% lookalike gave us the best cost per acquisition, i.e., gave us the best cost per petition signature. All right. Woo! So so that was more of a technology. This is more of a tactic, right? List building is always a big question, of course. Um, this is sort of the classic way to do it is to run an ad, or a classic way to do it at Facebook is to run an ad, um, uh, sending people to an online action somewhere. And the one on the right, I love because it is, if I remember correctly, it is from that moment in 2016 when Hillary had sealed the nomination, but Bernie and his supporters were not fully on board yet. So Clinton's campaign was running these ads, targeting specifically Bernie supporters, trying to bring them onto the Clinton train. But this was sort of the classic way to do list building in Facebook. But these are a lot more people know about them than did a couple of years ago, but it's still pretty new to some folks. Facebook now has a native list building application or ad unit called lead generation ads. And they're called lead generation because, of course, it's designed for sales leads. Um, but nonprofits, of course, and political campaigns can do it ourselves. And the great advantage of a lead generation ad is that it is native within Facebook. So if I click, oh yeah, I'm going to sign this petition, or I'm going to join this email list, or whatever the action is, they click on that. They stay within Facebook. Facebook pre-populates their name, address, email address, whatever it is you're going to ask them for. And then when they're done, it takes a couple of steps. But when they're done, if you're set up your systems right, the new people can flow directly into your email system. Where again, if you got it set up right, you can trigger a welcome message right away. And this is very, as we, as a lot of research has shown over the years, the quicker you follow up with somebody who's new to your list, the more likely they are to stay an engaged member. So with lead generation ads, or with any other recruiting system like that, Care2, various other places, you can certainly download the list every day or every couple of days, and then upload the new signers to your email system. But that, of course, has a delay. So anytime you can automate the process of people flowing in. And there are consultants out there who are very happy to help you with that. It's generally not terribly complicated. Things like Action Network or Salesforce or Every Action, the tools that we use regularly in the liberal activist space. People have worked out integration schemes to connect them with Facebook. So if you're trying to build a list, with lead generation ads, you can do all of the kinds of targeting we've talked about. So I could upload my current email list as a custom audience, create a lookalike audience based on that, and then target the lookalike audience with lead generation ads. And we'll stop for questions in just a sec when we get done with Facebook. So here's an idea that I stumbled across. I'm sure others have as well. But when I was working on that wind energy project, we were running into kind of the Trumpist mentality in Middle America. Wind energy is some kind of hippie crazy stuff that kills all the birds and is destroying America, right? And there are actually active disinformation campaigns out there as well. The Koch brothers, shockingly enough, seem to have funded a good chunk of that. So what happens is when we would try to run content targeting, rural counties in Iowa or Minnesota, they would immediately be inundated with negative comments, right? And what we found is all it takes is a couple of people to say something really nasty, and it shuts off the conversation. And honestly, it seemed to hurt the performance of the ads. So what we started doing systematically was anytime we were going to go into a new area, we would run page like ads. And I know there are folks out there who denigrate page like ads, or like you should build your you should build your Facebook following organically. Well, you can't always do that in the real world. So we would go into, again, rural Iowa. We would run these kind of generic wind energy. We had different messages we would test. The photo made a big difference. The three guys on the horses were a big hit. People must like horse butts or something. I don't know. But when we ran these recruiting ads, page like ads, it basically let us build a foothold, a beachhead in areas where some very loud people were hostile to us. So that when we began promoting other content later, we already had a base of people who were supporters. So those people would push back against the trolls. The reason that this worked is that these page like ads don't allow comments. So just something to think about if you're trying to reach into a new community, whether it's a geographic community or an interest community online, you can try using page like ads to build a base of validators in that community before you start running actual content. And see, oh yeah, we're almost done with Facebook. So my friend Chuck Westover mentioned this one on a training, and I got him to write it up for ePolitics. It's on that list of articles I put on epolitics.com. This is a really basic idea, but it can be surprisingly powerful. And this is a targeting option on Facebook that's only available if you boost a post through the page itself, if you push the boost button. It's not available through the ads manager interface. And it's basically people who like your page and their friends, right? And it can be so when you use this option, some of your content is going to be served up to your existing followers, but some of it's going to be served up to their friends. So your existing followers are probably going to engage with it. So you get some engagement going right there. But you're also functionally reaching out through peer-to-peer networks, right? Facebook, again, knows everything about us. So it knows which of our friends are more likely to respond to a particular piece of content. So if I select people who like your page and their friends, it is an easy way to, like I said, expand that base, but expand it through relationships. And when someone excuse me, when someone new sees a post that's been promoted this way, they'll see, and I'm sure you've seen this before, your friend Bob Dobbs likes XYZ page. So there's one, you're using people's social connections to tap into like-minded people. And then two, the friend's name serves as a third party validator. So it's like, oh, if this guy likes it, it must be good. Unless, of course, it's, oh, if this guy likes it, I don't want to have anything to do with it. That can also happen, but in the real world, outreach is a little messy. So why don't we pause for? We've got about 15 minutes left. So why don't we pause for a couple more questions?
All right. So we have a question. Would these lead generation tools in Facebook be connected directly to our org CRM?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. And I would talk to the CRM about your tech support or your customer service rep there about doing it. Yeah, that's the point. I think when I was doing that project with Save the Children Action Network, I think they were using Salsa. I don't really remember. But my friend John Wheeler, who was working over there, got them set up so that everything flowed neatly into the database.
All right, we have another question here. Does people who like your page and friends switch to people who follow your page and their friends after Facebook does that switch?
I assume, yes. Now, with Facebook, anything is possible. This option may simply disappear. right? So we shall see. This screenshot that I did, I think, is from April. So it may look a little different now. Okay.
Those are the questions that are in the chat right now.
Okay. Well, we got to hustle. So let me get through the rest of the presentation and we'll take more questions. All right, guys, we got a lot to do here. So, rapid response, I just want to point out that a lot of people, bad things happen. When bad things happen to good campaigns, um, uh, you know, we tend to push out rapid response messages to media, through Twitter, uh, to our grassroots followers via email or Facebook. But you can also run rapid response through advertising, particularly if you're trying to get a message to a particular segment of the population or a segment of your audience. Just keep in mind, when you're planning for rapid response, and believe me, rapid response goes best if you plan for it in advance, get your content lined up, get your spokespeople lined up, all of that. But do keep in mind that advertising can put a powerful piece of content out very quickly. And this one, of course, was about Donald Trump and the Access Hollywood tape. Um, Unfortunately, in this case, the rapid response did not work. So I'll talk we talk a lot about grassroots recruiting. I'm going to talk a little bit about grass tops recruiting. So grass tops would be influencers in some sense. In this particular project, this was for uh, Environmental Defense Fund, and they were trying to recruit people. Environmental Defense Fund has to work. They were still trying to peel off Republican votes around climate change. So what they were trying to do with this project is see if they could recruit people in targeted states or congressional districts that Republican Congress members might listen to. So generally, we were targeting business owners. Um, our ideal person was like a New Hampshire Republican county chair. So we were doing a lot of interest targeting on the back end, trying to get these folks. And then what we would do would be they would, like the post, click on the post, comment on the post, and they had EDF had people in the state that would actually try to follow up with these particular influencers in person. But the idea was dangle, again, as we talked about, dangle content in front of people and then get them to take an action. Basically, give them the opportunity to self select as somebody who cares, right? And because of the way we were targeting, we were again reaching uh, 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 people in a given profession. It can backfire on you. We were trying to reach farmers in particular in North Carolina because a lot of farmers are making money there now off of solar power. It's a thing to use your land for. However, we accidentally got quite a few people who listed their occupation as farmer because they liked to play Farmville. So your careful targeting doesn't always work. But I just want to encourage folks to think grass tops as well as grassroots when they think advertising. And here's another good example. And this one obviously uses LinkedIn. The National Whistleblower Center was again dangling content, was trying to recruit whistleblowers who worked or were involved with overseas shipping, everything from human trafficking to drug crimes to customs violations. So we targeted people on LinkedIn who basically worked for several different major shipping companies. I believe we did industry level targeting. I take that back. But we accompanied it with mobile advertising that was what's called geo-fenced. So we picked 6 ports in the U.S. The big ones: Long Beach, Seattle, New York, New Jersey. Added in Houston. So anyone whose phone was in that port would see these ads and then would continue to see them for a few days afterwards. And we worked with Rising Tide Interactive to do that. So it's not a thing you do yourself. You don't geofence yourself, but there are firms out there, plenty of good advertising firms that will do it. You could either, yeah, like Google it or ask around on a list server on Facebook to get pointed in the right direction. But again, we were trying to use these sophisticated targeting options to reach a very small group of people. Unfortunately, in this case, it did not work. I think the ask was just too much. Becoming a whistleblower is not something someone decides to do overnight. So it would have required much longer term and probably in person cultivation. But still, think about LinkedIn targeting. Like LinkedIn is really good at targeting particular professions, right? So, I do a training every year for the American Medical Association for doctors who may want to run for office. And AMA really encourages them to try LinkedIn because most doctors are on it, most physicians are on it. So if you're trying to connect with other people in your professional world because they might be more likely to support you than not, that's a way to go. But yeah, you could also, we might be trying to get engineers for climate change or something like that. So LinkedIn targeting could help you reach engineers. So this is a brand new slide, and I want to give a shout out to Mika Morris from Main Street One and Amy Hines Shake from Wildcat Consulting for suggesting it. Influencers and micro influencers. Yeah, we think of the big influencers, the Hollywood celebrities, like I get to work with on the Hometown Project. But a lot of your influencers may just be local folks. And if you recruit them organically, you can really go super local. There are paid recruiting platforms. I haven't used them personally, but basically, wannabe influencers sign up for these things and you may be able to find people who are influential within a particular niche you're trying to reach. And again, I'm not as familiar with this, but it seems like something that has real potential. And the folks that you recruit organically, and this comes from Main Street One, um, here's a case where they had recruited local um, folks to promote content out to their social networks. And then Latino Victory would turn around and promote those posts to a wider audience. And again, this is one, it's legit, it's real content, right? These are real people. These are not fake energizers or uh, influencers. They're folks. And so, but you're able to, if you use advertising, like in this case, you're able to help those voices reach a whole lot more other people. And it doesn't look so contrived, like unfortunately too much of our communications can. So I earlier showed or showed an example, I think, of promoting a news story from like a local news outlet. That can be very powerful as well because again, it's an outside validator. But when you've got individual influencers in their communities working like this, what can you do to boost their reach? And I again, these campaigns probably did not cost very much money at all, and I'm sure that the folks that are featured here were very excited to be able to reach a broader audience than they could on their own. So I think this is a tactic that a lot of folks who are doing local organizing can look at, using advertising to amplify those local voices. And again, thanks again to Amy and to Mika for suggesting this. The cat photo was my idea. That's a micro influencer if I ever saw one. Okay, so let's talk promoted tweets real quick. We're running out of time here. Officially, we're not able to use promoted tweets for politics, but I got the tweet on the right through after the American Fly Fishing Trade Association, thank you very much, put out a big report on particularly focusing on climate change. If I'd have used any kind of climate language in the tweet, it would have gotten stopped by Twitter because they don't allow political promoted content. But if you word it right, a lot of times you can sneak things through. You can target people who follow someone on Twitter, people who use a keyword or hashtag. You can target a list of specific users, although that one is a little trickier than it looks. Or, as in this case, you can target a geographic area. With Mr. Fishy there on the right, I targeted the zip codes around Capitol Hill, and I targeted the zip code of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service headquarters out in Virginia. Um, but this was very much, as you can guess, an opinion leader focused campaign. However, I also used Facebook interest targeting to reach anyone who cared about fishing. So we broadened our audience that way. So targeting decision makers, you can try to target employees or customers of a business. I love that. Legislative staff, reporters, and you can follow a prominent hashtag too. I have promoted my digital campaigning ebook on the Netroots Nation hashtag in the past. Banner video ads, as we talked about earlier, these are mostly bought programmatically. They're typically